Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Developmental Reading in English, Implementation and Teaching Strategies, Case Study 2 of 3. I'm Bill Joyner from the North Carolina Community College System's Learning Solutions team, and I'll be your host this afternoon. This webinar is brought to you by North Carolina Community Colleges and SuccessNC.org. Our presenters today are Nancy Risch of Caldwell Community College and Technical Institute, Taffy Graham of Stanley Community College, and Beth Reynolds of Wilkes Community College, or Harvard on the Yadkin, as it's known to the locals. Our moderator today will be Cynthia Liston, Associate Vice President for Policy Research and Special Projects at the North Carolina Community College System office. Cynthia will also moderate the Q&A at the end of the program. Throughout the presentation, we want to hear from you. Please type your questions and comments in the chat box located on the right side of the screen. I'll be watching the chat box and capturing all of your questions. We've scheduled some time today at the end of the presentation to address all of them. Once again, thank you for being here, and now without any further ado, I'll turn the program over to Cynthia Liston.
It's great to have everyone participate today, and I am just going to kind of kick this off by sharing a little bit of overview information, if I can pull up the slide here, and talk a little bit about how we have gotten where we are with the Developmental Education Initiative and particularly the Redesign Developmental Reading in English curriculum. And before I give that broad level overview, I also want to remind folks that we are doing three webinars, 3 consecutive Fridays here. The first one was last week. This is the second, and we'll have an additional webinar next Friday. These are all profiling different colleges who have been involved as part of designing the new curriculum and are either already piloting the new courses this semester or are planning for implementation in the fall. So I do encourage you to listen to as many as your schedule will allow. They are archived. All of them will be archived on the SuccessNC website. So if you can't participate live, then you can take some time at lunch or whenever it's convenient to listen to what some of the other colleges are doing. So with that, just a very brief kind of timeline overview here. As hopefully most of you are aware, the Developmental Education Initiative started in 2000. I think that the team was actually first pulled together in 2009, but most of the work started in more earnest in 2010. It has been steered by a state policy team comprising state board members, presidents, administrators, faculty, and all sorts of individuals, more than 30 folks from across our system and some stakeholders outside of the system. And the redesign work, the principles that have guided the English and reading curriculum were adopted by that state policy team in 2010. In 2011, an 18-member faculty task force was convened based on a nomination process and a number of external reviewers. And that task force has did the bulk of their curriculum redesign work in the first 6 months of 2012. We met biweekly to carry out that curricular design, mainly in the central part of the state, and had a couple of opportunities to do an overnight sort of extended meeting as well. In 2012 also, we had 5 colleges that started to beta test, so this was last fall, the new DRE courses. And also in the fall of 2012, we organized regional meetings around the state, and also the faculty did some presentations at NCADE, and also did a couple of sessions at the system conference that was held in Raleigh in October to share the curriculum and receive feedback on it. There are pilots underway at 7 colleges, so the DRE courses are in the CCL. They were actually approved for use by all colleges in February, and I guess in October is when they were approved for piloting at the 7 colleges that are doing pilots right now. So the implementation begins, full implementation is a one-year phased-in period, so colleges have some flexibility. It begins this fall of 2013, and ends fall of 2014. That is when the old developmental English and reading courses will be archived. In addition to these webinars this spring, we are scheduling some additional professional development in the fall for faculty and department chairs. So please stay tuned for that information. And the last thing I want to mention is that we have begun work with College Board on the creation of the new English and Reading assessment that will accompany the new curriculum. We had what's called a test item review or a binder meeting just about, I guess, 5 or 6 weeks ago with a group of faculty. We'll probably be doing another one of those within the next couple of months, and they are continuing to develop test items for us, and we are on track for that new assessment to be available in April of 2014. So that's just a very high-level picture of how we got where we are in terms of the redesign timeline. And I will now turn this over to Nancy Risch from Caldwell Community College, who will share what they are doing with their implementation. All right, Nancy, I believe it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. What we have done at Caldwell is, well, let me begin with just saying that I was very excited when I was selected to be on the redesign team, because the redesign is very, very different than the way we have been doing developmental at Caldwell. And so I can say that we were all quite scared initially with how this was going to work and what kind of changes we'd be making. So I really wanted to make sure that I not only had input in the process, but also that we kind of knew things were happening as they were happening, so we could begin to shift, because we knew that there were a lot of institutional things that needed to shift as we would make these changes. Just very briefly, as an overview of the things that I was going to discuss today, I wanted to talk a little bit about our current developmental offerings versus the whole new world of DRE that we've developed here, the issues that we identified early on as we were making the conversion, along with some of the possible solutions or ways that we have found to work around those issues. We'll talk about the spring pilot project that we have done this semester and the results of that. I also, we're kind of, I said knee-deep in developmental redesign. We are truly knee-deep in developing these courses. We are going to implement DRE fully in the summer, so we are right in the throes of trying to get everything ready and everyone trained for the courses to begin in just a couple weeks. And then also, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the professional development workshop that we have planned for faculty coming up in another week or so. So to begin, let me mention, too, that first, we have a developmental studies committee here at Caldwell that has kind of been a standing committee. It's made up of the chairs and the coordinators of the math, the reading, the English areas. Academic support folks are involved in that committee. The vice president for curriculum programs is on that, and our basic skills faculty, along with, you know, other testing center folks I think are in there as well. And it's basically, we've had this committee because we don't have a separate developmental studies department. Developmental studies historically has been, you know, for example, my department is English Reading Communications, so the English and the reading faculty are just all in one department, whether they're teaching college level English or developmental English. And the developmental math is in the math and science department. So we have kind of had this one committee that has always been a standing committee to kind of help guide the program. It provides guidance for, we would do a developmental studies manual if there's a policy that may pertain just to developmental studies. For example, our developmental classes have always had a 10% attendance policy, whereas most of the other college classes have a 20%. Those are the things that would come through that committee. As part of that committee, we pretty much kind of decided that we were going to wait and convert to the DMA classes kind of at the last, you know, we wanted to let everybody else go first on that one. Since I was on the committee for DRE, the more we developed this curriculum, frankly, the more excited I got about it, and the more I didn't want to wait. So we decided to convert to the DMA and the DRE simultaneously. If we're already trying to figure out the issues to convert our math classes, then we might as well, since we've got that figured out, just go ahead and jump, you know, head first into the DRE. So when we decided that and made that decision, this committee that normally would meet maybe once a semester began meeting pretty much every 2 weeks. We'd pretty much pull everybody together and discuss new issues as they arose. So we sort of became a transition team to anticipate issues and solve issues, and if one of us went to a meeting, we would come back and kind of report what we had learned. And then we began a campaign to really educate the college. We started looking at, what do advisors need to know and how do we tell students about this? And so I wanted to just kind of put this information about this committee because it's been very helpful to have all of these people around the table. You get student services folks in there, you've got your academic support folks in there, you've got instructors, and everybody can come together and we can discuss things like prerequisites and section numbers and that sort of thing. Speaking of prerequisites, one of the first things that we realized we needed to do was to, once we figured out what the courses were going to be and the competencies for these DRE courses, we had to look at every course that had either an old reading or English prerequisite. I realize, as I'm looking at this, that I lost a slide somewhere along the way. What we had done, what we've always done at Caldwell in the past is we've always taught, we've never taught integrated English and reading. We have English 075, which is an integrated course, yes, but we have offered that course because, frankly, we get so few students at that English 070 level and the reading 070 level that we've consolidated those. But then from there, students would go into English 080 and English 090 and reading 080 and reading 090. So if you placed into the 080 level, you were getting 80 hours in reading 080 and you were getting 80 hours in English 080. So a student would basically have 160 hours of instruction there. And so you can see that as we move to the DRE, we're integrating and we're accelerating. So this is a monumental change for Caldwell in that, what we have normally been doing with the luxury of 160 hours, we are now trying to do with 56 hours of integrated instruction. So that was one of the things that once we started looking at doing away with the English and the reading, we had to look at every course, every college level course that either required an English prerequisite or a developmental English or reading prerequisite. And our academic affairs committee generally meets in the fall to approve the catalog for the next academic year. So once we identified that we were going to make this change and we would convert to DRE courses in the fall of 2013, we knew that we had to get all this stuff in the catalog by January. Now, as you can see a little further down the slide, that we actually got everything pretty much done in February or March. But still, we have felt this driving force to kind of get things together really almost a year ahead or 8 months ahead. So we identified all the courses with English or reading developmental prerequisites. We met with program directors and department chairs, and I went to lots of meetings. We talked with faculty senate, instructional council, basically any place where we were getting a bunch of people from departments to get different departments together. I would go with my little road show and talk about the new DRE courses, what the competencies would be in those courses, the reading levels, and then I would talk about their needs, what they needed with their courses and what reading levels. Sometimes we would even look at Lexile levels of the textbooks they would use. But basically, I tried to match what they needed in their students with the courses that we had. I know that we're answering questions later, but I already see a question there about how do we handle the early childhood. Those are state mandated, and those have not been approved yet. There's been a committee that has looked at those. That hasn't been approved yet, I don't think. So we just kind of skipped over that in the meantime. Right now, we have the old prerequisites listed for the early childhood, but we have not we've not addressed that. But with everything else, pretty much everything else was a local prerequisite, and we were able to make those changes just by meeting with people and getting that information out. And so we did that all at once. Instead of going through and approving every single one for every single course, we just basically made a chart. All the program directors and the department chairs and the vice president signed off on all of that, and then we just kind of approved the one bulk of new prerequisites coming through academic affairs. But those are the kinds of things that you need to think about if you're going to try to make a change in the fall. I think most of us have this kind of schedule where this meeting is happening 8 months ahead of time, and so we really knew that we had to get on the ball there. We also added a co-requisite of ACA 085 to the two lowest levels of DRE, the DRE 096 and 097. We had a lot of faculty that really felt like in accelerating those courses, one of the things that we would be losing, especially from our reading classes, was the time to handle study skills. And that, these students maybe would need more help with some of that areas, more help with some of the reading strategies and, reading the textbook and time management, that sort of thing. So we have added a co-requisite of ACA 085 to the DRE 096 and 097. And now, of course, if they have the 085 when they take the 096, then the student doesn't have to take it again. But that added another aspect to our scheduling because we had to then make sure that we were scheduling enough of those courses and ultimately train folks to teach those courses as well. And so we did get everything through. We got our prerequisite changes and things all pretty much made in February. I think there were a couple stragglers out there that maybe would change their mind about a course or two. But by early March, we had all of that information ready. So the next thing the committee decided that we really needed to do was we needed some advisor training. We advise in March and register in April for both the summer and the fall terms. And we actually decided that we were going to use summer as a conversion and offer a few DRE classes and then offer some English 090 and reading 090 to kind of finish students out. But we decided that we didn't have enough of a student pool, to be honest, and enough of a faculty pool to be able to offer the DREs and the ENGs and the REDs. So we just decided that we would just convert totally to DREs in the summer. So because of that, we've got students registering in April for these courses, and students don't know what they're registering for, and advisors don't. They've been listening to me talk about developmental redesign for a semester now, but they really don't know what to do when they get the student in front of them. So we developed a mandatory advisor training session. We ran pretty much one whole week where we had sessions every day at noon and every day at 2, and we have 2 campuses, so we did this on both campuses. Plus, I think the next week we did some makeup sessions. But we basically, kind of got everybody in there for an hour so we could go through course crosswalks and the placement score crosswalks. We talked about those newly approved prerequisite changes. We gave them copies of the schedule. And ultimately just people to call. I find that a lot of times in registration, I don't get, people have questions and they just kind of figure it out. So a lot of what I did was just said, please do not hesitate to call me. Find me, call me. If you have a student you don't know what to do with, then let's make sure, because we have a lot of situations where we may have to, we may want to give a student a quick little writing sample to really see if he or she needs to be in that lower level class or a higher level class. Because, you know how it is when you have students that come in and they may have credit for a developmental class from, 14 years ago. And so we were just trying to make sure that we got students adequately placed. So a lot of what I did during that advisor training was kind of went through everything and then said, just don't hesitate to call me. And I've been very pleased that my phone has rung quite a bit and I've gotten quite a few emails, and so it's worked really well, I think. One of the other things that we felt that we needed to do was educate students, because students are obviously most affected by this change. It's a huge change for us, but yet we had not really, let them know this was coming. And of course, all of the developmental math and all of the developmental English and reading have been changed. So we, pretty much had to, everything's changing for students. We do some Wise Up workshops, is what we call them, on campus for just various things throughout the semester. So we developed a Wise Up workshop and publicized it through the normal student services channels for students about the developmental changes. So some students came because they had questions. Some students came because they got extra credit for coming, and that's fine too. We developed a handout that we gave out in all developmental classes because we realized that even though, students all have a certain advisor, a lot of times they just go to their instructor when they have questions. So we made sure that the instructors were able to talk. A lot of our adjunct instructors came to the advisor training because they just knew they wanted the information and they wanted to be able to get the information to students correctly. And we placed signs around campus in the advising center, and we sent out several emails, I believe, about the changes and asked them to call or talk to their instructor, call their advisor, or talk to their instructor if they had questions. And that was a big thing, and I'm not sure that we reached all the students that we needed to, because you know how students sometimes will just avoid that to the last minute. But so far, in looking at students that have been placed, I haven't seen a whole lot of students that have been misplaced, so that's been a good thing. Some of the most troublesome issues that we faced along the way were, believe it or not, things like developing new section numbers. We have 4-week math courses and we have 8-week DRE courses, and while we already have a section number for 8-week terms, we did not have a way to distinguish that, and the system wasn't very cooperative. And the folks that run our systems here, it was difficult for them to run reports if we used section numbers that had been previously allocated to another type of class. We have section numbers that are allocated to online classes and hybrid classes and high school classes and summer classes and evening and day and Watauga. And so it was very difficult. And in the end, I don't know that anybody is really quite happy with what we came up with section numbering. But we did develop a new section numbering scheme for the 4-week and the 8-week terms. The other troublesome issue was creating an easy-to-use crosswalk. I would create a crosswalk that I thought was, very simple and very easy to understand, and I get a lot of questions. And so we actually ended up with the same information presented in about 3 different ways for faculty advisors. And I thought maybe that might be more confusing, but what we did find is that really it's the same information, but it is presented in different ways, and one person will like one form better than they like the other, but the point is it says the same thing and they're getting the students placed the right way. For example, we have the crosswalk that says if the student has completed this course, then he needs to go over and take this new DRE course. We had another form of that created that basically said if the student needs this and wants to do that, what program they want to go into. So I can give people examples of that, or I can post them at some point if people want to see those. Dealing with the exceptions, with our crosswalks, we tried to look at everybody. They come with these certain placement scores or they have taken this class but not the other. What we decided to do with our crosswalk very simply, and I should have just kind of thrown it in here as a slide, but we basically decided that if you had finished the 070s, which were always for us in writing a sentence level course, then you would go into the 096, the DRE 096, because that's a paragraph level course. We did not feel that a student that had only really received instruction on the sentence level would be able to adequately complete an essay level course. So we had our lower level students going into the 096, and then if they'd finished all the 080s, they would go into the 097, and of course if they finished the 090s, they would be done. Well, what did you do with the student who has taken maybe English 080, but they've already taken reading 090? Or we often will have students that are more than 2 levels apart. The student may have understood that he couldn't take a lot of classes until he got his reading out of the way, so he went ahead and took his reading 080 and his reading 090, and he's finished with his reading, but he's never taken English 080. So there may be more than 2 levels in between there. So that was one of the issues that we had to do, was kind of dealing with the exceptions. And so we created a few workarounds, or you can maybe even call them multiple measures, that if we've got a student that doesn't easily fit on the chart, then we can give the person maybe the tape to determine reading level, or we can have the student do a writing sample in order to determine if that student is indeed ready for the the 096 or the 097 or what have you. We also, and I'm not sure if you call them PSPRs, the proposed study of, well, I forget what that is called. Anyway, our PSPRs are our program evaluation. I know in WebAdvisor students look at the program evaluation. We're trying to find ways to automate as much of this as possible, but it isn't very easy in Datatel to do that. So we tried to find ways to maybe make groupings, because you have students that have finished all the ENGs and the DREs, and they finish their developmental that way. And you have new students that come in and they need all DRE, but the ones who have the combination are the ones that are really going to be most confusing. And instead of an instructor having to pull a crosswalk out every single time, we felt that it would be easier if we could automate some of this. So we did try to go in and create groupings in Datatel where one group might be the ENG 080, 090, RED 080, 090, and that student may take that group. We also created another group that might be just all the DREs, 096, 97, 98. Okay, that student's done. Then we created the groupings for pretty much every combination in between. It makes the PSPR and the program evaluation longer, but it also automates the process where if the student comes in and say has the English 075, and then takes 096, 097, 098 in the DRE, the system just automatically knows that he has completed one of the groupings and he is good to move on to English 111. We faced a similar issue with the reading and English placement scores needing to be added together. We felt that if we had 100 advisors across campus adding those scores, there was 100 opportunities for error, especially if I maybe was one of them's doing math, So we decided we would have the test scores added in the testing center. So when students take the placement test, or at least for this year until we get the new NCDAP, students will take the test, and the testing center folks will add the scores. And then we created a new test field in DataTail. I think we call it like CPT, DRE, or something like that. And so there will basically be a combined score already there. So, and that's been entered manually, but the advisor just goes in and pulls up T-sum and can see here's what the combined score is. And so I think we've helped create a system where there won't be as much error along the way. But those are the kinds of things that you also really kind of don't know are an issue until you're suddenly faced with it, and then it's easier to try to work some of this stuff through ahead of time. The next thing we did was, making sure I have the right slide here. We also created, because we have this developmental studies committee that's working on the bigger issues, the issues that involve the DMA and the DRE and student services and such. But we also needed, just within our department, to design these courses. And we have, formally we've had a reading coordinator and an English coordinator. Well, they need to work together along with the folks from academic support, along with myself since I was on the committee. And so we developed a small course design team to look at some of the smaller issues and the smaller policies. Basically, we focused solely on DRE course design. We looked at designing a standard syllabus. We have a standard syllabus for pretty much all of our classes in our department anyway, but we really needed to make sure that we were getting enough E&G and enough reading in there, and then also meet the policies as far as the time and the hours and then the labs and making sure we had the right assessments, and the mastery was something we needed to work on. So this committee worked out a lot of issues prior. We've now pretty well developed our syllabi for the DRE 096, 97, 98. This is also the team that's looking at that ACA 085, which is the course we've not taught before. So we're throwing that one into the mix there. We've selected textbooks and lab software, and I'll get to those when I talk about each of the individual courses. But this is also the team that's developing assignments and assessments. And so we are pretty much ready to roll out everything to faculty for training next week. We've got a few things that we're tweaking along the way. But these are issues, and when you've got several instructors that have to agree, for example, late work is an issue in these classes. And we're looking at 80% mastery. Well, what do you do with an 80% mastery when you automatically take off points for lateness? We have usually a 10% attendance policy in these classes. And again, if you've only got 56 hours, how much can the student reasonably miss? So these are issues that we had to come up with. What if the student's meeting mastery but not attending? And actually, I don't think that's really going to be the case. But these are some things that we wanted to make sure that we worked out, and we had them well stated in our syllabi ahead of time. And like I said, it is so different from what we've done before. We wanted to make sure we had everybody's eyes kind of looking on it. So this course design team has done a fabulous job of getting together, and they also met about every 2 weeks. Now, there were lots of times when some of us were out of town or here and there, but we basically tried to meet every 2 weeks and bring something in, and we'd have kind of a new issue each time to discuss. Okay, so I mentioned before that we had a spring pilot project. As we got into this, I decided that I very quickly wanted to try teaching one of these classes. And so I actually team taught this with our English coordinator, Paula Rasch. We decided we would do an 8-week DRE 098 in the first part of the spring semester, followed by an 8-week English 111, because the hope is that we're going to accelerate students through and they can get to these college classes easier. And we also knew that we might have a lot of people that are taking DRE 098 in the first 8 weeks, and so we wanted to see how successful these students would be taking the English 111 after that in the following 8 weeks, and just kind of get a feel for the pacing of this before we had to really realistically kind of train everybody else to use this curriculum. So we did that, or we did that, and we're pretty much finished. We have one more class day on the English 111. We spread the word about this pilot project through flyers and announcements in developmental classes, and found that students were very excited about it. We wondered at one point if we would have enough people that would be interested, and we actually ended up having to kind of cut it off because we had so many students that were interested. They were very excited. Now, students were not selected based on a higher ability level. We basically selected students based on the combined placement test score that has been circulated to everybody as the recommended scores. but they did sort of self-select in that they were well educated on the requirements ahead of time. They had to speak with one of us to get signed into the class, so we were able, before they registered for the class, to let them know what the time commit was going to be and let them know just exactly how much work they were going to have to put in. And so they got a lot of, we kind of fussed at them ahead of time, I guess. We made sure they were well advised as to what this was going to be like. They knew they weren't going to be able to miss days. So, and we had a wonderful success rate. I know that's not going to continue because I know that, we didn't have the cream of the crop academically, but we had students that really wanted in this pilot and really wanted to get their developmental and their English 111 out of the way in one semester. So we had capped the class at 20. We actually began with 21 students, so we actually kind of overrode it for at least one. We had, out of the 21, our results of the pilot, out of the 21 students enrolled, one of them dropped very early due to absences. She dropped within about the first week and a half. And so I have not counted her in our success rate because she basically didn't complete any of the major assignments in the course. So out of the 20 that remained, we had 19 successfully complete the DRE 098. And I thought that was wonderful. Like I said, it wasn't, student ability wasn't any different than the students that I think will normally go into this 098 class. But we had students that were very motivated to succeed. Of the 19 that completed the DRE 098, all of them went into the English 111, and they all can They all can successfully complete the class. I'm not sure if they all will because they've gotten a little bit lazy in the last few weeks with their major paper here at the end. And so I'll know that for sure by Monday. I could give you more statistics on Monday. We just collected research papers today. But I can tell you that all students attended and all students completed all the assignments. And I felt like early on that was half the battle. And I think some of you will think that, you already know that. If you can get students to come and do the work, then that's kind of half the battle. So far, I think we've had a very good success rate with it. And like I said, all of these students can complete the English 111. And I'm not sure, looking at some of these final papers, that they all have done what they need to do. So I feel very good about our spring pilot. I'm not sure, like I said, that the success rate will continue, but I do know that the way we structured the course obviously worked for these students, that it can be done, and of course there's no question it can be done. Students will rise to the challenge. Let me talk a little bit about the course policies that we have sort of developed. We're using a very strict definition of mastery. The first curriculum guide that came out, the very first draft of that we were working with when we created this course pilot that we did, basically said that students needed to score an 80% or better on all major assignments. And so we pretty much stuck with that. And when we get into what the courses are, I'll give you a slide that tells you kind of what the major assignments are in each of those courses. But basically, if they have 3 essays, they need to score 80% or better on each of those essays. We gave them, labs, online labs they had to do, and we just basically said they had to have an 80% or higher lab average. And a lot of the little assignments they do, like for example, we do a book. We read a book-length work in this class. And so a lot of the little quizzes and journals that they would do on that, we put those in as lab assignments. So they would do those little journals and they would get counted as labs. We knew that at some point a student was going to do something that wasn't 80% or better. And what do we do in that case? We decided in our little course design team that students did need the opportunity to redo work. However, we did not want every student to be able to redo every assignment. We didn't feel like that was the right way to apply mastery either. I mean, we want the students at some point to be able to reach the mastery percentage of 80% on work the first time it's submitted for grading. So we allowed students to have 2, what we're calling redo attempts. I realize that for an English person, that's not maybe the best terminology, but that's the easiest way to describe it for students per course. Now, that means they could redo one assignment 2 times if they needed to, or they could redo 2 different assignments if they needed to. But basically, we allowed them to do 2 redos per course per 8 weeks. And out of those 19 that completed in our pilot, 10 of them did it without having to redo any of their work. I think 5 of them had to redo 1 assignment and 4 of them had to redo 2. And the one student who did not successfully complete the DRE, she had to redo she's had multiple we've just kind of continued to work with her throughout this semester to get her DRE 098 finished, and she will finish the 098, so she hasn't lost anything. She didn't finish the 111, but she's going to finish the 098. But she's had to have multiple. I mean, it was fairly apparent after the second assignment that she was not going to be able to do it in the pace that we were working on. So we questioned immediately whether the 2 redo attempts was enough, whether it was too much. By the end of the term, it looked like that was actually pretty accurate with the group we had. We used a strict 10% attendance policy. We reminded them every day that they were not allowed to miss more than 10%. We actually met 2 hours a day. So we met Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to 12. So they were meeting 2 hours at a time. We told them basically they could miss, because it's 56 hours of class, they could miss 5 classes, and on the 6th class they would be dropped, or the 6th hour, I'm sorry. They could miss 5 hours, and on the 6th hour they would be dropped. But if they missed class, I would very quickly remind them that you just missed 2 hours of class. So you've missed 2 hours, and you only have, 3 hours left that you can miss. We found that really wasn't an issue. There were a couple of students early on that missed, maybe a day, and they would come in and they'd complain and they'd complain. But what I found was that some of those students really figured out after they missed one absence, and we were kind of on them about it, that they needed to get themselves there. And so I've been very proud of a couple of our students that I didn't think were going to make it initially. In the future, we're probably going to offer these courses in mostly hybrid formats, where they do 5 hours on campus, for the lecture hours, and they do 2 hours online for their lab. And we will always offer one fully seated section of each of these courses for our VA students, because our veteran students are not able to. The Veterans Affairs will not pay for the online part of or any class that has an online component. So we will offer at least one fully seated 7-hour DRE 096, 097, and 098. But the rest of our classes will be offered in hybrid format. And most of them are probably going to be 5 days a week with 2 hours of student doing labs on their own. We will probably offer a couple of the 098 sections, though, that are 3 days a week, because that seemed to work very well. Students sometimes think it's more of a high school kind of class when they meet 5 days a week. They're more engaged when they only meet 3 days a week, and it seems more like a college class to them because it's either on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. So we do have some DRE 098s that we are offering more of like Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of schedule. But it's still going to be 5 hours on campus and then 2 hours online, or 2 hours wherever. Okay, so the way we're going to structure the courses going forward. The DRE 096, we're calling them mastery benchmarks. They basically are going to have 5 major areas in which they need to score an 80% or better. So they will have 3 formal paragraphs. Now, they may do more paragraphs. They may do journal types of things that go into that lab average. But basically, there's going to be 3 formally graded paragraphs. They'll have the lab average. That'll have to be an 80% or better. And then they'll have the final reading, writing assessment. And you've got kind of examples of those sorts of things in your curriculum guide. We will use a book length work. Now with 096, we've contemplated whether we're just going to use selections of essays or whether we're going to use a book length work, and that may, honestly, that may change semester to semester if we have a certain author coming to campus, or if we have a learning community around a certain theme. Sometimes we'll have, environmentally themed courses and workshops and things like that being offered, so we might find a book that pertains to that. So that work will change, but we do intend to use the book length work. We'll have the 10% attendance policy. We'll allow 2 redo attempts, and that course has a co-requisite of ACA 085. For the first semester or so, at least, we're going to be using the Fusion books. 1 and 2, we'll use Fusion Book 1 for the DRE 096 with the Applia Labs. And I'm not going to say that I recommend that. It was, at the time we were going through this and we had to choose textbooks, there were really only maybe 3 that were available, and Fusion seemed to be the one we liked best. We are honestly looking at other things, because as more and more things come on the market, we're trying to make sure that we're choosing what's best. But right now we've used Fusion, and I know that I've joked about this with some of the other committee members. There are maybe 17 or 18 of us on the committee, and we're all doing, we're all using something different. We're all using different labs, and in reality, we're all using them 17 or 18 different ways. So I don't think any of us is willing to recommend something, but that is just the one that we're using. For the 097, the structure of the course is going to look fairly similar. The mastery benchmarks for that course are 3 formal essays. Lab average has to be 80% or better, and then they'll have a final reading, writing assessment there. Also, book length work, 10% attendance policy, 2 redos. This course also has the co-requisite of ACA 085, but of course, if the student has already had that when he took the 096, then we won't make him take it again. And then we're using Fusion Book 2 for the 097 with the Applia Labs again. And then I think I'm about to go over all my time, so let me just quickly go through the 098. mix this one up just a little bit because we had that documented essay in there. We also wanted to work with documentation a little more and have an assignment that maybe was another essay because it was difficult to it's just difficult to get all these essays in 8 weeks. So we did 2 formal essays there that really did not include any kind of documentation. And we did that longer documented essay. We did an annotated bibliography working up to that documented essay, and that actually worked really well. I forgot how much I really liked that assignment. We joked about how students make that assignment much more difficult than it is, but it's a great activity with this class because they are reading, they're summarizing, so they're getting a lot of their, their reading skills, and they're doing a lot of that pre-writing and low-stakes writing, working up towards that bibliography, and then, of course, by the time they're working on the documented essay, and we use the same topic, obviously, so, the bibliography issues were sort of out of the way by the time they start working on the documented essay. So we did the 2 formal essays and the longer documented one, an annotated bibliography, lab average, and then we'll have a final reading assessment in that one because the documented essay kind of takes the place of the writing part of the final assessment there. We're also using a book length work. I just want to throw in that we are using the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks for the fall. That's obviously not a requirement. I think there's some sample activities in the curriculum guide for that one, but that is the one we're choosing for fall. And the same 10% attendance policy, 2 redo attempts, and we're using Fusion Book 2. We'll basically kind of split that book up, and we may even do something custom with that in the future, but basically we kind of split that book up and use it over 2 courses. The last thing that I want to talk about, and then I'll turn it over to Taffy, is the professional development. It's working out pretty much so that we have mostly full-time instructors that will be teaching the courses in the summer. We do have an adjunct, I believe, and maybe we might have to add one more, but I think it will work out well, and then our full-time folks will be teaching it in the summer. And then we'll bring out, most of our adjuncts will come in the fall. So the full-time folks will have a little bit of trial and error kind of under their belt. But we're doing, next week, May 9th, we're doing a full-day workshop for full and part-time faculty. And we're able to, to pay our part-time faculty who aren't under contract to come in. And we're going to do the course overview. I mean, a lot of them have heard this information, but they've not actually dug into the course materials and looked at what the day-to-day schedule will be like in this course. We've also not taught the integrated classes. We did an awful lot of reading in our writing classes, and we did an awful lot of writing in our reading classes, but we've not really structured assignments where you're assessing both of those things at the same time. So we're going to have someone come in and talk with us about really truly developing integrated assignments. We're going to talk about defining mastery and teaching reading, to be honest, for the writing folks, and teaching writing for the reading folks. So we'll do that in May, and then of course we'll have some instructors teaching the courses over the summer, and then we'll do a follow-up session in early August where we kind of go through that and we kind of look at some of the pitfalls we had and some of the things that worked really well, and maybe some new assignments as people have worked on those along the way. So that's kind of where we are now, trying to basically plan to get these courses off the ground. Our semester ends, I don't know, I think grades are due on Tuesday, and of course we start classes again the very next week. So we have just kind of a few days in between to get everything ready. Okay, with that, I know that I went a little over my time, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Taffy to talk about what Stanley's doing, and then I'll kind of look through some of these questions and try to prepare maybe some of the answers for you at the end.
Great. Hi, everybody. This is Taffy at Stanley, and I'm excited this afternoon to share with you a little bit about what we're doing here. We have not piloted yet, but we've done some beta testing, and the approach I've taken for today is to share a little bit more specific to what we've been doing in the classroom, because I've had a number of phone calls and emails from folks who are curious about that and about the route that we're taking. So this fall, the DRE courses will be replacing our current developmental reading and English offerings. We've been offering the English 75, 85, and 95 integrated reading and writing for quite some time now. I think they were doing that when I came here 6.5 years ago. And we've even done some fast track courses with the English 95. We've actually experimented a little bit with acceleration for the last couple of years. So moving to DRE isn't such a big leap for us because we started out in a pretty good place. And we've been fine-tuning and aligning with the new SLOs, but for the most part, it's just been a matter of sitting down and trying to get our courses a little tighter and being able to deliver in the 56 hours what we ordinarily would do in the 80 hours. And we're finding that we can, with some careful planning and creativity, do in 1 week what it used to take 2. And the students seem to like it quite a bit. Let's look at this next one. In fall 2012 and spring 13, we did beta testing. We offered 4 sections that were equivalent to DRE 97, and then 6 sections that were the equivalent to DRE 98. And I would say that we were very successful. The whole team has been pleased. The students responded positively to the acceleration. The retention was good, and our tracking indicates that the students are doing very well in their subsequent courses. In fact, I would go out on a limb and say the ones that have gone off track, it has not been because they can't handle the coursework in English 111. It's been because they were not emotionally mature enough to handle the course. So we're really happy with the results, and we attribute the increased persistence to the fact that students find the contextual curriculum more relatable to their real-world experiences, and we try to draw them in right away. And that's what I wanted to talk about mostly today, was kind of how we draw the students in. So in preparation for the DRE fall launch, we started looking at these areas for focus, aligning our courses to the new SLOs, and determining how students would demonstrate mastery, which has been a challenge for us, just like everybody else. Choosing appropriately leveled reading materials, because the integrated reading text that we've been using did not address this. And it was quite surprising to me to see the actual reading level of some of the articles that were in the paragraph level textbooks. It was just taken for granted maybe that because it was a paragraph level textbook we were using, that the reading was appropriate for the students. But we found out that it was not, and then when I went back in and actually checked some of these, I was surprised at just how high the reading levels were in those texts. Also, providing the relevant contextualization, that's been a primary concern as we've made the changes, and providing support for our DRE 96 students by adding a co-requisite of ACA 090. And we have had that ACA in place with English 075 and English 085 for the last couple of years, and we found that that really significantly improved our retention with those students. So that's why it remains a focus for us. So the first thing on my list was aligning content to SLOs and determine mastery. We organized our course activities into units that move up in complexity each week. And this kind of just happened. As we were trying to organize our beta test sections, we got together each week and we just sat down and went through what we thought we would cover and how they would align with the SLOs, and we checked that off each week until we had made sure that we had everything included. It also helped us to stay organized. It made sure that we covered all the bases, and by organizing into units, it sort of helps the students to stay organized as well, and I'll talk more about that later. But our units contain a number of integrated reading and writing assignments, and they're assigned with specific SLOs, and then each unit has one capstone activity, which is usually a high-stakes writing or some other project. Our team was really meticulous in going through the SLOs. I just want to reiterate that. We wanted to make sure that we had aligned everything well enough that we wouldn't have to worry about, with the rubric, we wouldn't have to worry about overkill when it came to assessing and making sure that our rubrics were aligned properly. So that's where we put a lot of thought into it. We did some great brainstorming. We shared ideas for activities that would work well between the levels, and we just really had a lot of fun with that part of it. The students must have an 80% average on each unit as a whole, and also a minimum score of 80 on the capstone activity. And starting in the fall, they'll also have to maintain that 80 on the lab component. We did not hold them to that in the beta testing because we really did not have a lab component that we were comfortable with doing that. We're not there yet with the lab, but working on it. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about the pacing for DRE 97. This is what we've done. It's not a prescription. It works for us, but it might not work for everybody. But it's just the format that evolved as we built the beta test sections here week by week, and we've been very happy with it, and it resonates with the students. So it's probably the route that we're going to stay with for a while. And as you can see here, week 1, we have some initial assessments, and we have an introductory unit. And this introductory unit is something that we do in every level of our DRE courses. We talk about and we read about why reading and writing are important as life skills, how reading and writing are basics that everybody needs to have for success in college and on the job. And you know, the students go out and they immediately get that text-to-world and text-to-self connection because they're required to go out to the library or online and find articles. We have them bring in articles that discuss the relationship of strong reading and writing skills with obstacles that occur when these skills are underdeveloped, and we also have them look for articles about the relationship between strong reading and writing skills and college success. And, you know, doing this reading brings the facts home to them, and it allows them to kind of answer their own question, what's in this for me, and why do I have to take this class? And I don't know about you all, but we hear that question quite a bit. You know, why am I in this class? Why do I have to take this? And we find a very good response to that as an initial ice-breaking week 1 for us. And we also do brief biographical paragraphs so that we get a raw writing sample and also get the students immersed immediately into the writing part. And we have a project unit for each 2 weeks that the students complete that are they have a number of activities in class and homework activities. And then the final week we do our assessments, we do remediation, any final revision or retesting that needs to be done. So a sample unit, and I chose DRE 97 because that's the one that I worked the most on myself and have taught and more familiar with. For example, we might do, in that week, we might do the reading an autobiographical essay, Salvation by Langston Hughes, and then the students would read selected leveled articles about Hughes, about the Harlem Renaissance, jazz, art, literature, and then they get to make the biographical connections with the author as well as connections to pop culture, and they really like that. We do some more biographical writing there. As we're doing the reading of these articles, we do guided annotation, teaching them what to look for as they read, discussion points using active reading and pre-reading strategies, graphic organizers, pre-writing activities. There's always a pertinent vocabulary activity or activities to go with each unit. They're related to the reading as well as to academic vocabulary. We try to bring in terms within our classes that the students are hearing out and about on the campus. And we even came up with a list of academic terms that we feel students need to be familiar with. And those are worked into a number of exercises and maybe even some games. One of our instructors came up with a game based on 7 little words, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a game you play on your phone. And she came up with a great little game that they can play as homework and turn into her for vocabulary credit, and they really like that too. Discussion and critical thinking prompts, short essay answers. We use a lot of open-ended questions, low stakes writing there, short answer questions to check reading comprehension, Summary and response writing activities, we do quite a few of those, more low-stakes writing. And then with this unit, we would do a personal descriptive essay, which would be their high stakes and their capstone project for this particular unit. Okay. We go through the 4 major project packets, and we do require them to score an 80% average on that entire unit, plus they have to have an 80 or above on the high stakes writing. And, you know, the students who fall below the benchmark, we do allow them to revise and retest. We provide interventions as needed using conferences. Our student success tutor has an excellent group of tutors. And we sometimes even refer students to counseling services if that's what's needed. And the students who are consistently low are retained in the class even if we know they're going to get an R, because we feel like the more exposure they have to the material, the better the chance is that they'll get it the next time around. And with developmental students, with any student, you never really know when that light's going to come on. So we don't drop anybody for non-progression as long as they're attending the class and putting forth some effort. We like the P and R for grading because we feel like this is going to be easier for students to explain, easier for us to explain to students that, you know, they might just need a little bit more time, especially in the lower levels. We have a lot of concern for students at that level, and that's where they call me Mother Earth for that reason, because that's where my heart is. And, you know, a lot of teachers find it difficult to have that talk with the student when you're having to explain to them that they just need a little bit more time. And I think the P and R is a lot less punitive, and I think that will work very well for those instructors who might be inclined to let a student go who isn't quite ready. So I'm kind of happy about that, but that's me personally. Overall, we in each course read 10 to 12 main articles, essays, and stories. We do about the same number of correlated low-stakes writing activities, 1 paragraph, 2 paragraph, 3 paragraph, summaries, responses, those kinds of things. There will be 3 high-stakes writing, formal essays, descriptive, narrative, and comparison. And the comparison essay in DRE 9.7, we do require 1 source, and at that point we're giving them just a very basic introduction to documentation and how to avoid plagiarism without really going into the MLA. That's ramped up in the 098 section, but for 097, we really want to just kind of teach them not to cut and paste and to show in their text where they have used someone else's ideas and to make sure that they list that source at the end. So our course policies are really similar to what Nancy shared. Most of our courses are going to be hybrid, 5-seated and 2 online, and we will have 1 section of each course available for our VA students. So that's pretty much what we've done in the classroom. The next thing I wanted to talk about was choosing appropriately leveled text, which has been challenging because until the publishers catch up, we have to do some of that on our own. And many of us have been successful using Lexile.com, where you go to Lexile.com and set up a free account. You can choose a paragraph from somewhere in the center of the article, just or the text that you want to check, and you submit it as a plain text file. And the program determines the readability level, which is just a great tool. And it's really helped us to find some good readings and to weed out some that, you know, we were using that might have been too hard or too easy. We try to stay within that suggested readability level for the given course, but occasionally, especially in 98, we might use a more difficult piece to stretch the students a little bit. For example, our lead instructor for DRE 98 likes to use, and I'm going to say, a fiction, and because we're not killing literature and we can sandwich a little bit of fiction in there between the informative articles. So she might have her students read with her through the Mask of the Red Death, post-Mask of the Red Death, and then they would sandwich that with articles about the author or historical perspectives from that era, other informational texts, and she has them come back and write journals on each of these readings. And then she teaches them to do the works cited page for each of those articles that they have gone through together. And the final project for that, the final product that comes out of that assignment is just an annotated bibliography, which is a great way to teach that. And we've been very successful with that. The students enjoy doing it that way. Okay. Providing relevant contextualization. That's where I think the DREs give us a lot of opportunities to keep our students engaged. The busy community college students have made it very clear to us that they don't want busy work, they don't feel like they have time to waste, and they want to know what's in it for them. And when we contextualize, it allows us to show them how to make those connections. And those real-world connections, you know, once they see the relevance, they get more engaged with what we're doing in the classroom. When they find out how what we're doing relates to their success in their program or relates to how successful they'll be in life in general and how they'll relate with their families and their employers, they get a lot more excited about it. So, and I was going to share today, we're in the process of designing conceptualized versions of DRE 96 and 97 this summer, which will work with the EDU 119 course, the one that has no prerequisites. And we'll also be adding a co-requisite of ACA 090 for a learning community. And that's an exciting project that we're working on this summer. We're going to be using a lot of the same readings in the three courses, and apply the DRE SLOs as the students work on their reading and writing intensive assignments from their EDU course. And the ACA is added in there to provide the support and resources to help us keep them retained, and we're really excited about that. So, and you know, that contextualization is another thing that we thought about a lot when we were working on building this curriculum, because it gives us an opportunity to work across the campus with instructors from other disciplines. DRE 98 is designed to be contextualized as a co-req with any curriculum level course except for English 111. And I just think that really opens up doors for us. We've been thinking about courses such as CIS 111 and even social sciences and biology. So those are things that, you know, in the future we will do once the dust settles, but they're exciting to think about. That's a great way to open doors. And then, of course, adding the support for DRE 96 students by making ACA 090 a co-requisite for that course. We have been using ACA 090. We offer this as a seated option and a hybrid option, and the students are, they know the ACA teachers and the English and reading teachers are all talking to each other. We kind of help each other keep the students retained. If they start to fall off in one class, then the teacher in the other class kind of nags them a little bit to get them to go back to the class that they've slacked off in. So we're hoping that if we keep that in place for DRE 96, that will help our retention there. So it's a practice that we plan to continue. And one more, our plans for textbook and lab. We're hoping to customize the text to include our unit projects and a bank of suggested readings. We've been working on a list of readings. We all have our favorites and things that we know have worked and things that we would like to continue to use. We want our custom textbook to have a significant and user-friendly handbook section with grammar practice that can be done in the classroom or independently. Although grammar is taught within the context of students' writing, we do know that it's a necessary it's necessary for them to have additional practice, and that's one of the reasons that they're with us to start with, is because these are the things they really need to work on. We're going to MyLabs Plus as a college in the fall because our developmental math is going that way. So we're hoping to have a custom MyLab course built for us to use this fall, and it will be either My Skills Lab or My Writing Lab. I'm not sure about that yet, but the representative has assured me that they can customize something that will fit our needs. But and so that's where we're going. I don't really advocate a particular technology or textbook or product because I think we all have that choice to make. And what is going to be the right thing for the students and faculty at your school might not be the same as what works for us here. So that's a very personal choice. So I guess that's where we are. If I could give any advice today, I think the most important thing to remember is that we don't have to be perfect right now, first thing out of the gate. We have a lot of opportunities to work together with the teams on our campus and across the campuses with each other, and to share what we have and chat things out and find something that's creative and fun that gives our students the best we have to offer. So thank you so much, and I'm going to turn it over to Beth.
Thank you, Taffy. How's everyone this afternoon? Hope you're feeling good today. I am from Wilkes, and currently we are very similar to Caldwell in that we currently offer reading 80, 90, and English 70, 80, and 90. So again, like Caldwell, we were making a very big shift here in our developmental program. And what I've done today is have a timeline of some of the things that we've done, and very similar to Caldwell and Nancy's program, we began meeting with student services and anticipated those changes that we were going to have for the fall of 2013 when our institution decided that that was where we wanted to go with that. That was a joint decision from a lot of the administration and the deans and faculty within the college. So it was not just one decision, it was the whole the college that worked together. We also looked in preparation at our placement test numbers for fall of 2013. And we looked at what we had in fall and then took those numbers and tried to see what our enrollment would be based on the new placement test scores. That gave us a gauge for where approximately how many students we would need to plan for fall of 2013. Now that was labor intensive, but it has given us a very good idea of about how many we would have in 97 versus 98 and how to break it down. We decided to implement that curriculum for 1 year. So we actually, for the math, we decided to go ahead and implement that, which in this case, we would have gone ahead and done that here at Wilkes as well if we had the integrated courses to begin with, similar to Taffy at Stanley. We also redesigned the crosswalk a little bit from what we had done from the one from the task force to our college. And we had a lot of people around the campus, from the placement testing people in student services to some of the other faculty, and we've had a lot of various people helping us with that. Now, I put a sample up here of our DRE crosswalk, and we went through this in various scenarios, trying to come up with what seemed to work for us here at Wilkes. This has been a pretty complicated process, as Nancy was just saying earlier in hers, that figuring out who fit where because of the courses, and if they had a reading 90 and English 90, where did they go? We found that to be a similar situation as well. And then we also lined up our assessment scores here with the new, adding them together so that everyone would have that. And we provided that to all our advisors. Now, continuing through with our timeline, We planned and completed a college-wide advisor training similar to Nancy's again. We did something a little differently in that we kind of identified an advisor in each division who could be the expert for that area so that they wouldn't be calling us all the time. We took this and we practiced with them and went through scenarios of students and helped them to see where, you know, if we needed to revise our crosswalk, we needed to revise any of that information on there. That really helped us make sure that we had it streamlined so that when we did go to the rest of the advisors, that they would know more about what was going on, and they did, and they felt very well prepared. We revised that session, and with the support of the administration, of course, doing that for us, we offered several different time slots. We also did videotape it, and, well, not really videotape, I guess. We actually had it taped so that they can get this through a link and they can watch it when they need to. So if we missed anyone, we were very concerned about that. The adjuncts and other people who may not always be up to date on some of these things, that they could go back and look at this and see how it was that we established the advisor training. We did that jointly as well with our student services. So we had everyone involved, so it wasn't just one department doing this particular workshop that we did. And that came in with all the communication that we've had with the registrar, the records manager, our financial aid, that we've all been trying to plan all this together. Again, similar to Caldwell, we compiled a local prerequisite list and we shared with the faculty and deans. We looked at those course requirements and went through our regular curriculum approval for the committee that looks at those, and we went through all that. And we also looked to see, did it actually reflect where we wanted to be? So, for example, I believe it was our medical office assisting and maybe the human services, we actually looked at the levels, the Lexile levels that were in those courses to see what type of reading skills someone actually needed to be in those earlier courses so they would be successful. And therefore, the prerequisites we put were based on those Lexile levels for the books. So it wasn't, we made sure that we put those in the right place. Then we also looked at what courses did we need to have in the catalog to reflect those requirements. And again, like Caldwell, had to get those ready for the January, February date in the catalog. So that included the courses. It also included the degree requirements that we had to look at. So we were doing all those same things. Okay. Now, I, again, like Taffy, at Stanley, we were having trouble still finding, there's a shortage of like reading materials combined in with English and Lexile, so you have to find your reading material Lexile and develop some of those writing assignments around it, which already, really, if you think about it, and even in higher level English, you're often reading a lot of the material and then writing about what you've read. So that's already established in many cases, but not down into looking at the whole reading process. I, again, like Taffy was at Stanley, those textbooks are kind of hard to find that fit that. And as Taffy said, you know, the textbook companies are catching up with us, and they're changing some of their materials, and there are some new ones out that are starting to reflect that more. Now, again, like Caldwell, we wanted to communicate to the students that the changes were occurring and what did we need to do. So we've done posters, we've done flyers in their classes. We went to all the developmental studies, math, reading, and English classes to begin with and gave them a flyer because they don't always read their email. And the other thing we did was do a scrolling web notice up on our main page where it would pop up to tell them that they could not register for these classes because we had put a perk on their account in their data tail so that when they went into their web advisor, they could not register themselves without seeing an advisor prior to registration to determine exactly where they needed to register. So this is just an example of one of the posters that we had out on campus to get everyone ready for fall. So thought I would put that in there for you. Okay, our classes for the fall we have set up this way right now with 7 hours in class. That would be face-to-face. Now the reasoning for this was because of that low-level student who's going to be in 96. We felt like they needed to have more face-to-face instruction with the teacher to begin with. And then we gradually backed off and put more online, the higher level courses, and you can see that there. Now we had to vary it some for delivery and some of the other off-campus well, they're still main campus locations, but there are our Ash and Allegheny campuses, because they don't have as many students like in Allegheny in Sparta, so we can't always have those exactly the same way as we've got it set up here on the main campus. So what you see is what we're planning for the main campus. Now one thing we have been able to do is we built into the schedule for our IET division this year. They have been under, I think it's the SIP, one of the improvement projects, and they've dedicated that time for their developmental classes. So as a result, we are able to go up to their facility and use their classrooms and their computers in that location and provide those classes for them when they need it. So that is going to be nice to have that, and I hope that that will also help with the contextualization that we will need to be developing a little bit more with those. But we will have some up there for them this semester in the fall. Now I put a sample schedule in here. The way we did this, we also had to work on the section numbers, and we had to break out what block which one was in, because our college, we also decided to go ahead and move to the DMA simultaneously. We felt like it would be better for the students overall and that they could succeed and that everyone would move on and we'd all get adjusted to all of the changes at the same time. Now I've given a sample up here. If you will notice, I don't know if you can see this very well, but in the one right here, it says hybrid, but really it only has the hour online, and then down here we had to put a number in, and I can show you this actually a little clearer on the next screen where you can see how we break these down because it includes the DMAs as well. This is a sample schedule that we had set up with our dates and our blocks, and you will see that what we had to do is we had to put under block 1 H1001 was the DMA and then the DRE. Now, the 1 indicates what block it's in, so we put block 1 as the first 4 weeks, block 2 the second, 3 the third 4 weeks, and then 4 the fourth week. So you can see how we've gotten these broken up to meet the needs of the DRE and the DMA. And of course, we tried to make offerings set up so that the students may end up having 96 the first half of the semester and take 30 and 40 the second half of the semester. So I thought that might help you all see how exactly we set that out so it would work together with all of that. Now, if you look at Block 1 review, we're looking at whether everyone has finished and has passed, or if they need retesting, what's going on with them, because of course we don't have very much time to do that in between these weeks because basically they go out one and into another. Okay. Now right now I went ahead and worked with some of the faculty. We started down here on the main campus first. We have not progressed all the way through our other campus locations yet, but we have offered just 2 brief 1.5-hour sessions for our faculty that we pretty much covered kind of the course overview and the structure and looked at the Success NC and all the information that's on there, and also the course content as well, but we just looked through all of it and talked about a lot of it, kind of as a springboard to our next part, like similar to Stanley, the way they did, where we'll be delving into it at a deeper level with the actual things that we'll be doing more in the classroom and how a typical class time will look. Now, we've got some materials we'll be using with the AFLIA, and truthfully, we haven't totally decided on this yet, but currently we have used USA Today in our Reading 90 courses, and they're lexiled very appropriately, and it includes a lot of current events, which is very good for our students, and of course they don't always like that, but they need to become more aware of globally than they are. This is one way to do it using the USA Today, and you could again use that for themes. So I'm thinking that I had not decided on that exactly with everyone, but we may be using that for the courses as supplemental type reading material for probably 98 at this point. And again, like Nancy at Caldwell, we also have community reads. So we have one coming this fall that we could possibly end up putting that in with the course, that we still have a little bit of discussion about that we need to do next week. And some of the things that have presented us with some issues have been, we've had some trouble with our data tail issues with programming everything to allow our students to register like they needed to, and exactly how we're going to plan all of this out with the other departments with the 8-week courses on the other end. But I think, you know, as we kind of jump into this a little bit more, we'll figure out the rest of this. Also, looking at one thing that we have really been thinking about is the in-between time sessions, and also if you move down that next to last bullet and you see revising curriculum for repeating students, we had thrown around, if you have a student repeating, that it might be a good idea to have an alternative assignment for them that you could develop, such as maybe another unit assignment. It depends on how you have that set up in the classroom, but we were discussing that as having some alternates for our math too, in addition to the reading and the English ones. And then also, we're looking back at some of the assessments and we haven't made a final decision on exactly what to use with some of the assessment after they come into the classroom. But similar to Caldwell, we've done very much the same thing, getting ready for the fall, and done some of the same things as well as Stanley. So this has gotten us on track to prepare for the fall, and now we just need to do some more faculty training with everyone. So I will pass this along back to, I believe, Cynthia now.
Well, that was incredibly helpful and insightful, I think. What we will do now, and I want to be respectful of our time, I think we will go over the allotment, but we'll try to be respectful and not take too much additional time, but we certainly do want to be responsive to the questions.
Cynthia, this is Nancy. I think when I was talking, there was one question. Let's see, I looked at the question about early childhood, I think.
Oh, yeah, I can quickly give an update on that.
Okay.
There is a committee of early childhood program folks and DRE faculty team members who met probably about 3 weeks ago, and they've come up with some recommendations, and those recommendations have been sent out to the colleges. So the decision on what the DRE prereqs will be at the state level will be determined by the state's curriculum review committee, and that process is underway. I believe they're intending or hoping to have those determined at the May CRC meeting is the last that I heard.
There was another question there, I believe, and this is Nancy from Caldwell again while I was speaking about what did you decide for your local crosswalk between the old developmental and the new DREs? And I should have, I'm sorry, I neglected to put that in my presentation, but I can send that to whoever wants to. I've got my email address there on my welcome slide for the CCCTI part. But we did not go with the course crosswalk that's in the curriculum guide, we did use the placement test crosswalk. But the course crosswalk, because of the fact that we offered the English 075 and then we offered the 080s and 090s when it got to the reading in the upper level English classes, we kind of developed our own. And I'll be glad to share that with you. And basically, we went through just sort of what the competencies were in the DRE courses and what we felt students had done in the English and the reading classes the way we had taught them. And like I said, you know, we knew that if a student had not written anything more than a paragraph, he probably would not be ready for a documented essay, or if he'd only written sentences, he wouldn't be ready for it. So we just tried to look at what the student had done in the courses that they had taken and then what they would be asked to do in the next course. So I'll be glad to share that with anyone who wants, you know, just to email me and just ask me if you know, copy of the crosswalk. I'll be glad to send that out.
Okay, great.
And no, we don't have an exam period, sorry. We don't have an exam period anymore, so we didn't have to deal with the extra, you know, the long class periods or anything like that. We didn't do that.
And the next one, Nancy, was what time of day was that the pilot that you did?
We did a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 12. It was like 10 to 11:50, so it was morning, and it was only 3 days a week.
Okay, good.
And let's see. Yeah. Does the state require instructor supervision? No, we ran it as a hybrid class. Now, I know that probably for the system it would be considered web enhanced instead of hybrid because it's not 51% online. But we did not. I mean, basically what we did is, you know, we have 5 hours a week in the classroom and 2 hours a week as the online component. And we do count, well, it's 7 hours for the 8 weeks, but we basically give the instructor the 3.5, you know, contact hours credit for their load. So we do, yes, pay the instructor for all 7 hours of instruction because they're, you know, they're grading those labs. And like I said, our labs are not all just computer graded. We're doing journals and quizzes and things like that that we're creating and just running through that lab system. So yes, we're paying for the instructor for the 2 hours of lab, even if the student's doing it on his own, just like we would for any other hybrid course.
Cynthia, the one that I had is on here that I see is, are the 90 level ACAs followed by a 100 level ACA? Or, I thought that was a good question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it says on here, are the 90 level ACAs followed by a 100 level ACA, or is the 90 level all that is required? That was one of the questions that people had. So I guess that would be for Taffy or Nancy.
Yeah. I'll be glad to answer that. It is a developmental ACA course, and here at Stanley we still require them to do the curriculum level 100 level ACA after that.
We don't require a 100 level ACA, so the ACA 085 is really all that's required. Now there may be other programs that require an ACA 111 or an ACA 122, but that depends on the program. So you know, it just depends on the student's program as to whether they have to take another ACA course or not.
Okay, another question here. Oh, I'm sorry, was I interrupting?
No, you're good.
Is anyone using lab components alone to determine mastery?
We are not, no.
You're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we are, I see a question about manually grading all the mastery assessment. I mean, yes, we are. The only thing that's graded online or by the computer for us here at Caldwell are those lab assignments. But the essays, the paragraphs, I mean, those are all graded by the instructor as they would be for just a, you know, a normal lecture or class, I guess.
And this another one related to lab assignments. Do you allow multiple attempts on the lab assignments?
Yes, we did. The APLIA system is set up so that students have 3 attempts at each. You know, there's 3 different assessments for each little, you know, area. And so we actually encourage students to do that because we told them they had to have an 80 average by the end. And so I told them not to stop when they got an 80. They needed to try to get to 100 if they could, because when you get to one that you can't score anything more than a 60 on, you need a lot of those hundreds to kind of average you out. So we encourage students to do the lab assignments until they got to 100. You know, use as many times as possible till they got to 100. So that would help with their average. And we did not have any students that were in trouble on lab averages. They all did fine on that.
Another one here, how did students register for 098 and 111? Did they register for both at the beginning of the 098 semester?
Yes. And we're going to do that going forward. That was a big debate at Caldwell as to whether we let them register for just kind of one section at a time and then do a whole complete new registration every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks, or whether we let them register for the whole semester at one time and then just do drop add every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks. And we decided that it would be easier, I think, overall to let them register for the whole semester at one time. So we'll go ahead and register for students for 4 DMA sections and for 2 DRE sections if that's what they need. And just then handle, if students need to drop add or switch their schedules around, we will handle that. We felt that it would be easier to handle the changes than it would be to register a whole new crop every 4 weeks as far as consistency. Plus, I felt like, personally, if you know you're already registered for the next section, then maybe it would be a little bit of a bonus or an impetus to finish, you know.
Sure, great. Good.
Yeah, we're registering them too that way. And that way the financial aid and everything else just works out better that way. So that's what we decided for us.
Okay, thanks, Beth.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question that came up when Taffy was presenting. It says, well, first of all, there's a number of questions in here asking if folks can have access to various materials and crosswalks. And I encourage you all to contact the presenters directly and request that. I don't want to speak for them, and I don't want to put them on the spot with everybody here. So, you know, obviously we have these slides, and so some of this stuff is already available if you go to the website and access the webinar, but I also encourage you to reach out to your colleagues, and I know that we're very lucky in having very collaborative folks who share a lot of information across institutions. A question, Taffy, that came up while you were presenting: what do you do with students who do not need remediation? I think this was when you were talking about pacing.
Yeah, well, during that last week, when we do some, we allow remediation throughout the 8 weeks. But on that last week, you know, once they've done their final assessment and turned in their capstone project for the course, then they are done pretty much. So,
Oh, go ahead.
They're done when they pass.
They're done. And what text did you use for 097?
Okay, right now we stayed with our mosaics text that we have been using for a number of years because they are an integrated text, and it's one of the ones that has been around for a while, and everybody here was comfortable with it. But we only pulled certain chapters from that text, and we supplemented with a lot of our own materials that we had gone out and Lexi leveled. We also used the Pearson textbook reader that was packaged with our mosaics text for a couple of things. But a lot of outside stuff, so I think that's why we're really leaning towards a custom text for the fall and spring.
Okay, good. Question, and then it says, what do you do as the lab part of your classes? I think this was also when you were speaking, Taffy, but I'm sure other folks can respond as well.
Well, we've been using My Skills Lab, and the students work on that both in a guided setting as well as on their own.
What about Nancy or Beth?
For the lab component? We used the Applia labs that came with the with the Cengage Fusion textbook, but we also created a lot of assignments in there. So we used those labs for grammar review and some reading comprehension activities. But we also, like I said, we used a book, and so we would put some quizzes that went with that book and some journals and things like that. Applia allows you to create assignments within there. So that was basically kind of the vehicle we used to do a lot of those daily type grades and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, and we did some of that too, but we used Moodle, and we ran it through our Moodle for those other little quizzes and activities that on the online part for the hybrid component. And we used the My Skills Lab primarily as for grammar to reinforce the skills that we knew the students needed. Things that turned up in papers that seemed to be across the board. We would assign those particular units in the Skills Lab.
All right.
Now, I was wondering if, Nancy, if y'all can load your Applia into your Moodle gradebook.
We can. We did not use Moodle for our pilot because we're actually in the process of we're changing everything at Caldwell. So we're changing from Blackboard to Moodle also in the next year. We were in between. And we didn't have enough Moodle licenses at the time. This is kind of a long story, but basically we did not have a Moodle account for that that pilot. Now we are going to set Moodle accounts up in the future, and so that is one thing that we want to do, is to be able to export the Moodle gradebook, because that's the problem with Applia is the students can't see their overall average. I had to keep telling them what it was. So that's one thing we will be doing, is we'll be exporting the Applia assignments into the Moodle gradebook. Yes, we will.
Okay.
Another question here, are you doing whole class grammar lessons or just individual grammar feedback?
We did, and this is Nancy again, we did, we called it just-in-time grammar, and that's really truly what we did. When we would take up an assignment, we would see there was a major issue. We would kind of step back and spend 20, 30 minutes going over some grammar activities, but we kind of waited to see if it was an issue before we did it. So we spent a little bit of the class period here and there going over some of that, and there were one or two things that we went over, and then we went over them again because they still had those issues in the next essay. But we did not plan it in. We just had some kind of flex time that we could use for whatever we sort of needed it for.
And that's about the way we handled it as well. This is Taffy. We would just address those grammar issues as they popped up in students' papers, and the big guns that show up all the time, the run-on sentences, the sentence fragments, spelling, those kinds of things. But just as needed, definitely these were addressed in the classroom.
And the funny part, I'll add, the funny part about that is that even though we sort of did that as needed in the DRE 098, we actually had to do some review of that in the 111 as well. So we would say, now remember we just did this in the 098 a few weeks ago, but so I think that just may be something that students constantly need a reminder of. Even if they sort of have it at one point, they can very quickly kind of forget. Or so it was funny that even after having gone through all that in the 098, we kind of did some of it again in the 111 as well.
Another question is asking if anyone has done these classes online yet, and I think the answer is no, but perhaps you guys know something I don't. At least not yet.
No.
Not yet.
No.
Okay.
And I don't know that I can even say not yet. I don't think we're going to be headed there. Caldwell. We have not had good luck with developmental online in the past. I think the 2 hours a week is probably enough. Now, we may experiment with that at some point moving forward, but I know that for the lower levels, the 096 and the 097, we have no intentions of trying anything completely online.
Right, us too.
Several folks have asked for the presenters' email addresses, and I will check in with Bill. Perhaps we can have those added to the webinar presentation, if it's not already embedded in the PowerPoints, so that folks can directly access those.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Okay, great. I think I have pretty much hit all of the questions on here. Do our presenters see any questions that I may have missed? Otherwise, I think we can turn it back over to Bill. And again, I will say thanks personally for a great set of presentations.
Many thanks to Nancy Risch, Taffy Graham, Beth Reynolds, and Cynthia Liston. As we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that today's presentation was recorded, of course, so you can watch it again on demand at successnc.org. Sometime next week it should be posted, and I invite you to check out successnc.org for other helpful webinars and videos. So on behalf of North Carolina Community Colleges and the Learning Solutions team, thank you for your participation and have a great weekend. So long, everyone.